Hey guys, for this video, I want to show you the sculpting tools that I'm going to be predominantly using when I'm sculpting in Blender. And before I show you how to sculpt the tools that I use to sculpt, I want to let you know that in order for you to be able to use your tablet, so I'm assuming that you guys have your own tablet here and a stylus pen, because sculpting with a mouse is going to be super difficult. So yeah, I really suggest if you don't have your own tablet, go get one on Amazon. I think they have one as affordable as $80 or $60, and you could get a decent one for that price. Or if you really want a high quality tablet, you could get a Wacom Intuos Pro, which costs over $200, but you could always get a used one. But yeah, there's some decent ones that are really cheap that can get the job done. All right. Okay, so if you guys go to edit and you go to preferences, before you sculpt, you need to go to your input here and make sure that you have emulate 3-button mouse. Okay, that way you're going to be able to navigate with your tablet and your stylus pen. Just turn that on, and if you hold the Control and Alt and you just drag your background here, you're able to zoom in, zoom out. If you want to pan to the left, pan to the right, hold the Shift key, hold the Alt key, and just click and drag here in the background here, and you're able to pan. If you want to just kind of orbit and look around your mesh, you hold the Alt key and just drag the background here. Alright, so I'm going to show you the sculpting tools that I use for creating stuff in Blender. And I'm going to select the sphere here. I'm going to Control Tab and I'm going to go to Sculpt Mode. And if I, right now I do want to go ahead and just add a little bit more resolution. So I'm going to just go to my Active Tool and Workspace Settings there, and I'm going to go to my Remeshed, and right here, the voxel value. The voxel size is 0.1. I'm going to bring the value down so I have more resolution to work with. And I'm going to click Remesh. You could press also, the shortcut for Remesh is Control R on your keyboard. So every time you do something here and it's stretching the mesh, just press Control R and it will recalculate and it will add more topology on those areas that you stretched out. Let me just undo that. Okay, so the main brushes that I use, I'm going to talk about them, okay? So first, I want to talk about, I'm going to go from here on to the bottom. I don't use every single brush here, but I'm going to tell you what I'm actually going to be using when creating realistic characters. So if I hover my mouse over here, so it tells you what brushes these are, okay? Alright, so this one here, the draw brush, I do use it, and the reason sometimes why I use that is, let's say I am sculpting the muscles of the character and I want to volumize it, I want to add a little bit more volume to it. This is a good brush to use. So let's say I'm doing like the bicep of the character and I see that it needs to be a little bit larger. I usually crank up my brush size and just make it bigger, and I just go over it and just sculpt it and just to make it pop out some more. So this is good for adding volume to your overall shape of the anatomy. And really, most of the brushes here, I just mainly just keep it in default settings. But the things that I really do change, like I keep the cursor, fall off, stroke, all these like the same settings, but as far as the radius and the strength, this is never going to be the same. You're always going to constantly changing the strength of the brush and also the size of the brush, okay? So if you press F, you're able to change the brush size, all right? If you press Shift F, you're able to change the intensity, how much it's sculpting, how deep it's sculpting. You could change the intensity, the strength of the brush, all right? So you're never going to stick to one. You're always going to be changing those values a whole lot. And you could also change the values here, all right? You can scroll down. If you go to the work settings here, this is it. You could change a few things. I'm gonna go over some of these also when it's time for us to sculpt. And yeah, so the draw brush is good for adding volume. Draw sharp is another thing that I mainly also use. Let's say I want to make like cuts on the muscles of the character. If I'm doing his abs, I would be using the draw sharp. So if let me just bring down the brush size, press F, and then bring the brush size down. And I'm gonna also add a little bit more geometry. So if you wanna really use the draw sharp brush here, you generally wanna have more geometry here to be able to create those deep cuts, all right? So I'm gonna go to my remesh and I could bring down the value so I could have more geometry to work with. I'm gonna press Control R, so there's a little bit more geometry. So if I go here, you can see that there's like some cuts going, all right? So this is also one thing that I use a lot if I want to create wrinkles, if I want to create some cuts on the muscles. All right, you could even use this sometimes you want to add like veins on the character. But the main thing that I use for adding veins is going to be the draw brush right here. But this is also good for like really, really tiny details, all right? You could hold Control and then just paint, sculpt on it, and that allow you to sculpt and elevate the mesh. And if you just paint and just dig here, without holding Control, you're able to just push in the mesh, all right? Okay, so draw sharp is really good for nice cuts and wrinkles, and if you want more definition to your muscles. And this right here, yeah, I don't use this to be honest, but I use the clay strips like a whole lot, all right? This is like the main thing that I really use when I'm adding a shape to the character face or the character's muscles. This right here, once again, I keep the settings for the stroke and the fallout. Most of the settings here is default, but I do change the radius and the strength a lot just like for most of the brush. So for the clay brush, it allows you to create like a mesh on top like a clay, and it allows you to build it up just like how you would when you're sculpting in real life, where you take like a piece of clay and then you put it on top of that clay mesh that you're working with, and then you get another piece of clay, rub it on your hands, and then you slap it on top of that mesh that you already slapped on once, and then you just kind of like put it on top and smooth it if you need to. And also I'm gonna just go ahead and bring down the rim mesh here so I could have more to work with. Control R. There you go. And yeah, you could even smooth it out. If you hold the shift key on your keyboard, you could hold shift and you could able to smooth it out. Smooth out your mesh. And yeah, when I'm using the draw sharp to make my cuts here, I always like smooth it out because I don't want to make it look, you want to make it look natural. So every time most of the time when I'm using my cut, after I make my cut, I'll hold the shift key and then just kind of smooth it out. All right, to create a nice, more natural wrinkles type of thing. Okay, and when it's time for us to do like more details, like the really defined details in the face, I'm going to talk more about that. Okay, so yeah, clay strip brush. Another thing that I use is going to be, I don't really use the clay thumb, I don't use the layer. I use the inflate brush, so maybe if there's something that maybe I have a mesh here, right here, that gets, maybe I got a mesh here that becomes like way too thin, right? So maybe I have something there that's way too thin, and I can go to my inflate brush and then just make it larger. And of course, when you start to see the polygons get stretchy, you could remesh that. All right, and it's taking a little while to remesh. I'm just gonna put it back to 0.0. I'm gonna put it to 0.023. All right, so that's going to be faster to remesh. So yeah, this inflate brush, it allows you to thicken things up. I don't use the blob, and the crease I don't. Smooth brush is going to be what allows us to smooth the mesh. And the shortcut for that is just holding the shift key and then just go ahead and smooth, paint over it. All right. So if you want to change the brush settings for this and you feel like it's smoothing too much of your mesh, you could go to the smooth brush and bring down the strength level. And yeah, like if I'm working with a really low resolution level, like in the beginning stages, I like to keep my smooth brush to a low value. That way, if I'm smoothing my low poly mesh, it's not really melting down. I'm still keeping some of that shape. So you could bring it down. So now if you smooth, even bring it down some more. So now if you smooth, you're able to smooth out the mesh, but at the same time, still being able to keep the shape there. All right. And yeah, as I said, I do that in my beginning stages of my sculpting. I keep the smooth lower at a lower level. And if I start to have more and more subdivision and more details, and it's going to be harder and harder to smooth out the mesh, that's when I crank up the strength here to a higher value. And this right here, flatten brush, this of course allows you to flatten out the mesh. So to flatten out the mesh, I do use the flatten brush, but I also use the scrape brush. I switch between flatten and scrape to flatten things out. Especially flatten. Flatten is just a really good brush because you could even make like hard surfaces here with that brush quite easily. Yeah, so I switch between those. I think most likely I use the scrape brush, but sometimes flatten also gives you the difference between flatten and scrape. The flatten kind of, if you use the flatten, it also gives you more of that smooth feel to it, so you could kind of smooth out your mesh also with the flatten brush. It's like, I think the flatten brush it feels like it's a mixture of the scrape brush and the smooth brush at the same time. It flattens and it really softens the mesh. And really, these I don't use, but the grab brush is something that I also use a lot. This here allows you to just grab the mesh and just move it, pull it out. All right. If you want to adjust the overall shape of your character or the proportion of your character quickly, you could crank up the brush size of your brush and quickly adjust the shape really easily. So I really like this brush. It's something that I constantly use. And if you want to adjust the size of your character, maybe just a little bit, maybe some small features of your character's face or a little bit of maybe the fingers, and you want to bring your brush size down to just kind of adjust it. So really how much you want to cover, how much you want to move, you have to adjust your brush size based on that. These I don't use. But masking is definitely something that we're also going to be using. So with masking, what's good about this, you can click here and you could mask a portion here and you can see the dark areas. So the dark areas here that are masked, those are going to be protected. When I say protected, that means if you go to any of your brushes here, let's say I'm going to go to my clay strip brush here and I start sculpting in this area, you can see that I'm able to sculpt everywhere that doesn't have the mask on. All right. So this can be very useful when you are sculpting the character's face or the character's body, because there might be a time when you just want to adjust the eyes of your character without having to influence any part of the nose or any part of the mouth. And this is a good brush to use. You want to mask that lower area of your face so you can just focus on and manipulate just the upper part of the face. This will allow you to do that. Okay, masking is really, really good. All right, and for the masking, yeah, we have that. What's good about masking, you could also smooth it out. You could hold the shift key and smooth it, and you could Alt M on your keyboard, Alt M to get rid of the mask. And let me just remesh this, Control R, because I saw that there was like a little stretching there. So if you start to see some stretching there, Control R to just redistribute the polygons so you're able to have more polygons, so you're able to sculpt on that area again. All right. But yeah, masking, really great tool. You could go here, paint, and hold the shift key and smooth it. That way you got like nice soft transition. Alt M to get rid of the mask. And also there's the box mask and the lasso mask. The box mask here allows you to just click and drag, and you're able to create and mask out a huge portion of your character. And the lasso tool allows you to draw out your mask. So there are times when you might need to do this where you're able to mask things a lot easier and faster. And box hide, so this one also, we're going to use this a little bit. This allows you to hide a portion of your character's body, a portion of your mesh. So let's say you're doing your character's torso, right? And you're looking from the side view of your character's torso, and you just want to like adjust the chest muscles and maybe the abs of your character, and maybe the arms is like kind of getting in the way and you can't really see the obliques, the side muscles of your character. Then what you want to do is you want to use the box hide. You just click and drag and hide that part of the mesh, so you're able to see more of your character's body that you're not able to see visible before. So let's say, let me see what I'm talking. So let's say this is going to be like the character's arms. All right, of course it doesn't look like character's arm, but yeah, let's say that's what it is. And let's say you want to like, let's say it's kind of in the way, right? Let's say it's an A pose. Your character's in A pose, and you're trying to adjust like the chest muscles, and you want to adjust like the underarm and the obliques, and it's kind of hard to see and adjust this area if this thing is on the way. So what you want to do is you want to go to box hide and just kind of hide that, right? You're not going to be able to see that particular mesh, but don't worry, it's still there. It's just not visible at the moment. Yeah, you could like easily hide it, hide that mesh, and then you could sculpt your stuff. You could sculpt the obliques of your character without this getting in the way, right? And if you want to show it back again, you just click on the background, just click. Yeah, just make sure that you are back on that brush again. Yeah, click on that brush again and just click on the background, and it shows your mesh again. Yeah, so that's something also that's a very helpful tool. And another thing that we're going to be using a lot is the move tool and the rotate tool and the scale tool. So if we want to pose our character or scale up just a portion of his body, we could use the move tool, the scale tool. We could readjust our position. So one thing that we could also do is we could like, you know, the mask, you know, let's say I want to mask this area out, okay? You could invert the mask, Control I. And what's cool is you could have like the scale tool. Let's say I want to make the entire arms bigger, right? I could go to the scale tool, and you could go to the sculpt here, set pivot, and you could set it pivot to mask border, set pivot to mask, okay. Okay, so what we really want is we want to have this tool to start right here. And if it's not allowing you to put it right there, that's because what you need to do is you need to go to your mask right here, and you could kind of just paint this out with this mask. You could hold the shift key and then just kind of soften this out. So this is going to be like kind of in a way you're like activating this area. All right, so that way you're smoothing it, you're activating the area. So now when you go to the scale tool and you go to sculpt, set pivot, and you go pivot to mask border, it creates that scale tool wherever that border of the last mask that you have touched. And that way you're able to, let's say you want to scale out the arms of the character, you could scale it up easily, the entire arms, make it bigger. And then you go to the move tool, you can like move it down. All right, so this is something that we're going to be also using. And you saw how I smooth out the edges here. So that way there's like a nice transition. If you want to use the move tool or the rotate tool or the scale tool, there's like a nice transition between those, and you're not going to see like a huge seam here. And that's the purpose of using the mask and smoothing out the edges of the mask. All right, yeah, so those are the tools that I actually use a lot for sculpting characters, and I explained to you why I use them. And just keep in mind that you could also set your own shortcut for these. All right, for each of the tools that you're going to use a lot, yeah, I highly recommend you create shortcuts, and you do that by just right clicking on the brush, and then you click assign shortcut, and then you just press the key that you want to be assigned for the brushes that you want to use. All right. Okay, and yeah, so those are just, I want to go over the tools that I'm using a lot, because in the next video we are going to begin sculpting our character.